Welcome back. Part 2 of the saga. It is becoming something of a saga now, doing this conversion. Some days I wonder why I voluntarily put myself through this, but there we go, we're in it now, aren't we? So what are you going to do? It was my birthday yesterday. Hey, thank you very much. Got a couple of nice little toys from the wife. Nice long reach pair of mole grips. And this must be a breaker bar. I know, it's a torque wrench, and I'm not going to use it as a breaker bar. First one I've owned, one of those tools that I've just never got around to buying, even though I've managed to rebuild a car without it. And I think the only bolts I actually torqued to spec in the car were the head bolts, and I borrowed a friend's for that. That's because I blew a head gasket before, because I didn't retorque it when it was hot. So that's on me. And I've got a nasty habit of just doing things up as tight as they feel right, which probably isn't the right way to do it, I'm guessing. So yeah, we have a torque wrench now. Anyway, I listened to your advice. We were going to use the Toledo manifold, but as we know, it's very deep this way, which is going to require a lot of grinding, and apparently, reading online, you will go through into the chamber before it fits. So, I bought an MG 1500 exhaust manifold, which is a lot less pronounced here, and that manifold and that will fit together. But there's another problem. The downpipe on the manifold is this triangular flange, and it sits at a slightly awkward angle in the car. Plus, the Toledo manifold, as you can see by looking at it, has a very definite 90-degree air path, which, you know, I'm not a race tuner or anything, but I know that generally when you're talking about air, gases flowing, you want the little corners as possible. And with the exhaust manifold, it actually sticks out at a funny angle. I'm guessing on an MG the exhaust actually goes down the side of the car, whereas on a Triumph it goes down the middle. So my exhaust manifold comes out of the head, comes down, and goes down pretty much vertically. The MG one doesn't. It comes out and goes at an angle like that, which means the next bit you put on needs to come back in like that. So you'd have to replace most of the exhaust. So I bit the bullet, spent more money. And we've got ourselves a Herald manifold, because everyone's just saying, why don't you get a Herald manifold? And, you know, it is a better fit, as you can see. However, of course, this comes with its own problems. Excuse my drill bit, it's missing a roll pin on that side. Comes with its own problems. If I can get it off. Get off. Let's take it over to the bench and I'll show you. So as you can see, I've already drilled and tapped my barb for my vacuum takeoff. I've already profiled out the aperture, because it was 1.5 inches before, it needs to be 1.75 for the HIF 44, and you still have to grind some material off this to make it fit. How much? That much. As you can see, that's quite an extreme grind, and this doesn't actually even fit properly yet. I need to take more material off. So as you can see, the water path then becomes redundant because, well, you know, look at it. So I've just gone ahead and chopped the pipework on both sides. Not a problem, we can plumb the heater matrix in separately, it doesn't have to run through the manifold. I don't drive the car in cold weather. But that's going to require more grinding to make it fit. People online did say you're going to have to remove some of the water channel to get it on. I wasn't aware quite how much you'd have to remove, and I've still got to take more off it. I started off with a flat disc on a grinder, beveling it, and it quickly became apparent that I'd be there all day doing it. So I took to a cutting disc, zip, cut a rectangular piece out the middle, pried it out, and still didn't fit. So I went to one of the, I don't know what you call them, the stone discs. They're a few mil thick, they look like they're made of asbestos or something, a generic grinding disc, I don't know what they're called. went in one of those hard, and then tied it up with a flappy. But I was doing it on the bench at work, so I couldn't quite tell where the two manifolds sat, whether they sat exactly square or not. They don't, but it still does require a bit more taking off. So that's today's job, that's the long and short of it. I need to grind more material off that inlet manifold to get the two to fit together. And also I don't want them pressing together because obviously exhaust manifolds get hot, inlet manifolds you don't want it getting hot, so we need to grind it ideally so that at least there's a very small gap between the two just to sort of minimise heat transfer. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, of course, then, is the aperture, the neck of the manifolds. Stay still. Which, as we can see, is set up for a HS2. And obviously we are going in with the HIF 44 carb, which is this. So if I grab a homemade gasket as a template, we've got a problem here. If we line that up square in the middle, we can see that two of the existing holes aren't going to fit. They're a bus ride out. That's not going to work. How do we solve this problem? I don't know. Now I do have the plastic spacer block that comes with the two. And I'm thinking of maybe trying to get like a countersink bolt that will sit flush in that, to bolt it down to that and then somehow get the carb on. But I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Don't know how I'm going to do it. Because this carb has 4 bolts. So even if I make an adapter plate, which has got countersunk heads in it, which bolts into here, when I come to line this up, it's still going to foul on the 2 studs that we put in here and here. So I can only hold the carb on with 2 bolts. Now a lot of carbs are only held on with 2 bolts anyway, as in the case of the HI44, of the SU4. So I don't know, is that going to be okay? Can I use those 2 bolts to attach the adapter plate to the manifold and then the other 2 corners to attach the carb to the adapter plate? Is that going to be alright? I don't know. That will also mean that the carb is only attached to the inlet manifold via 2 bolts going through a plastic plate. And that's concerning. Whilst it feels almost like Delrin, it's very thick, very dense plastic. I'm sure it's very hard. Having a carb attached to a manifold via a bolt going through a plastic plate, is it going to snap? You know, if you go over a bump or hit something, is that going to snap and the carb's just going to fall off? I don't know. But I can't think of another way at the moment of doing it, so I'm going to have a little bit of a think on that one. But for the time being, I need to carry on grinding this manifold until we can get it to fit with this exhaust manifold. I don't want to touch the exhaust manifold, I don't want to grind that, because it's not that thick when you put your fingers in and do the old pinch test through the walls. It doesn't feel that thick, and it's cast iron, and it's the hot side. So if I'm grinding and I accidentally blow through into my exhaust manifold, it's going to be a pig to weld it back up because it's cast iron and it just doesn't, you know, you're just welding cast iron is apparently a bit of a specialist thing, and I'm no specialist. Whereas the inlet manifold is obviously the cold side, so if I was to blow through on the inlet manifold, heaven forbid, I could JB weld it or something like that, because, you know, I think it's magnesium, so you don't want to go near it with a welder. But hopefully I could, worst case scenario, fix the inlet manifold with it a lot easier than I could an exhaust manifold. That's my thinking anyway. So we've obviously clearly ground away a lot of material already. So I think I'm just going to carry on grinding material away from that until it fits. Still got to grind this face down a bit more here. It should be fine. Feeling inside, there's a big thick block there, and the air path sort of sits, well, difficult to show you, but there you go. See that shelf in there? That's essentially what we're grinding into. Right, let's talk. Just get on with it, James. Grind it. It ain't going to fit itself, is it? Right, that should be enough. I'll show you how we're measuring it up, because you could put them both on a flat surface and use a straight line, and then make sure that both the flanges are pressing square against the floor or the platform you're on. But I found another way of doing it. So what I've got is I've got the exhaust manifold just hung on by the two corner bolts, and it's not on tight. You can see that it's just rocking. It's just hanging off those corner bolts at the moment. So what I can do is now hang my inlet manifold just on the little dowel pin. The other side's missing, always has been. Never got around to replacing it, so I'm just going to put a drill bit in for the time being. And then holding the inlet manifold nice and square against the block, I bring the exhaust manifold up, I rock it up, and make sure that I can get it flat against the block without lifting the inlet manifold away. So inlet manifold is held nice and tight, exhaust manifold up until it's square against the block, which it is, and it's only just, you can hear it, just touching the inlet manifold. So that should be okay. Now if we wanted to cut any more off, we can take it back, and it should leave you with a little mark. Because it's rusty, you probably won't be able to see it. Where is it? I can't even see it. Oh, it's just here. Oops, there's a tiny little rust mark. It's been tapping in the same place. There's hardly any rust left on that. You could cover that in some kind of paint or engineer's blue, whatever, and then obviously just see where it's, you know, where it's touching on your inlet manifold. But like I say, I've been grinding and grinding and grinding on this, and that is how much you've got to cut out of it. It's a fair amount. So don't think you're going to come in with a flappy and just buzz it down. I mean, you could do it with a flappy, but you're going to be there a long time. I'm using a cutting disc at the moment and just going backwards and forwards across it. There's a couple of small, looks like we've blown through in here. On the inside, there's nothing there. There's a solid block, so that's just a bubble or a gap in the casting. So I think that now should be okay. That one on. That one in. Hold it nice and tight. Bring it up. It's borderline. Maybe I'll take a tiny smidgen more out of it. Yeah. Just for good measure, I'm going to give that one more buzz. I'm just going to make sure it's not touching anywhere else a second. Also, point to note, if you're doing it yourself, it needs a slight flat grounding here as well. This is the bottom of the water channel, the casting there. It touches on the corner here. So just be aware, in case you're grinding away, and every time you bring it up they're interfering with each other. Don't assume it's here, it could actually be here. Right, one more lick with the grinder. Alright, well that's snagged in with the top bolts. I really must find a nut for that one. Problem. Oh yeah. The lower ones go in here and here, and I can barely get my finger in there. So how the hell am I going to get that in there? They were fiddly on the last manifold, but this one I could probably get this side, but this side no. So after that I think I'm going to have to take this back off and cut that water channel out completely, just to give me an aperture to actually get in there with a UJ on a ratchet and actually get those bottom bolts in, because I can't. There is, yeah, it's not happening. So I guess I better mark them with a marker pen where I need to cut, and then come in here and try and zip that out with a cutting wheel. It never ends, does it? Sits on there nicely though, I'll say that, along the top. But man, that'll be my vacuum takeoff stud. Bloop. I have to cut that down massively, because that is now like a way too long. And obviously the old heater hoses, I can either get another length of that hose and run it all the way around to there, which, you know, I might do. To be fair, that can probably just sit on top of the inlet manifold like that, because the carb's going to be back here, and that's the cold side, so I could actually run that heater thing across the top. I just need to find out what diameter that heater pipe is. I don't like having wheel studs in heater water hoses to stop them leaking. I never did find out what this bottom hose is for either, hence why that was capped off with a wheel stud and a Jubilee clip. I don't know what that's for. You got water going into your heater, water coming back out of your heater. What's that for? I don't know. Don't know. Right, let's take it all back off again. And then cut some more off it. It's on. Chop just enough out of the bottom here so I can get in there with the UJ and nip those ones up. But she is on. They are touching, I'll be honest. Stop dripping. But, you know, not too sure what to do about that. Touching, heat transfer here to here, yeah, that's a concern, but at the same time you've got cold air going in through here, so it should be self-cooling, right? It's literally drawing fresh air in through there the whole time, so I don't know. Is that going to heat up the air? Is it going to give me an issue when it's hot? I don't know. I guess until we get it run up, then we're not really going to know. But there we go. So that's our Herald manifold on. So now I've just got to worry about what I'm going to do here. And I really don't know yet. Do I get a spacer cut, laser cut in aluminium? I don't know. Right, we're down the workshop. It's been a few days since the last video, the last section of this video. Had a bit of a think, and I reckon I got it nailed. So, bear with. So first of all, our spacers. This is the one the Carb comes with. It's a nylon block, 1/2 inch thick, which is just to space, obviously, the Carb away from the manifold. However, you can also get one of these. This is an early one. This is from a Mini Cooper, apparently. It's an alloy. Feels like aluminium or some kind of alloy. So now we've got a metal version. I'm happy that we can use this basically in the same way that a wheel spacer would work on a car. You know, if you get a wheel spacer, right, what you have is you have countersunk holes, it bolts into the hub, and you have more holes in the spacer that the wheel bolts through. Well, this is going to be the same thing. So what we're going to have is, we've got some countersunk Allen head bolts, which are exactly the same as the ones that go into the manifold. So this is the same thread pitch for the manifold. This is 5/16 coarse thread, 16 threads per inch. So we need to countersink this in 2 corners. This will allow this bolt to sit flush, and then the other 2 holes I can then use to hold the Carb on. Just with a couple of these bolts, washers through, and the Carb will then just bolt straight through the face. Sounds like a plan, right? However, there's only one slight snag, and that is this gasket is exactly the same as the face of the manifold. Manifold's not here, obviously it's bolted onto the car. But if we lay the manifold over this, we can see that the holes don't line up. Obviously this is 1.5 inch, and this is 1 3/4 inch, so the holes don't line up. So what I do need to do is reprofile these holes to make sure that they fit this before I countersink them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an aluminium infused resin. I'm going to fill the 2 holes that I need to move, take it over to the pillar drill, start with a very small pilot hole, and then widen them out, and hopefully I can basically move these holes inboard slightly. I don't know how well that's going to work, so let's find out. So what we're using for this is a 2-par polyurethane resin, fast cast, and we're also going to use aluminium, This is just a powdered aluminium that we use for casting various parts, and as you can see, it's a really, really fine powder. When the two are mixed, they make something like this, and it's difficult to get across on camera, but it is, I wouldn't say it's rock hard, clearly it's not, but it's really hard and very heat resistant. We use these for vacuum forming, so you are sucking hot plastic over the top of it, and you can use these things over and over and over again. They don't get hit hot. If you were doing something with fiberglass, then after about 2 pulls, you got to take it away and cool it down because it starts warping and malforming. But this resin doesn't. So I'm hoping that's going to bode well and essentially make something like a chemical metal. So what we've done is, we've got our piece, we've put a little bit of plasticine over the ends, we've then poured them up with a resin aluminium mix. Now I can take the plasticine off, sand that back so they're nice and flush, and then we can start to reprofile the holes that we actually need. So let's see if it's worked. And there we go. So that's with those now sanded back so they're nice and flush. So we've just whipped over it with an 80 grit, then a 120 and finally a 400 just to polish it up a little bit. And it looks a bit messy on camera, but they are super smooth and flat. You can see them obviously because of the colour difference, but they are absolutely flat and smooth. So the next job now is to mark our new drill holes, so we will use our gasket for that. We know it goes top right, bottom left. So we'll just have to find the sort of the right area, if you know what I mean. Keep moving it around until we get the opening just right. And then what I'll probably do is just zap it with a bit of paint in the holes. That'll give me a nice circular cutting guide. And then we can take this over to the pillar drill, clamp it onto the deck, go down with a nice small one, maybe like a 2 or a 3 mil just to get it started, and then slowly start to widen them out. And of course we're just hoping that the drill doesn't suddenly walk off to one side. The resin is going to be softer than the aluminium, there's no doubt about that. Other than pouring liquid aluminium into these holes, you know, there isn't really much you can do about that. So this is more of an experiment. At the end of the day, if I really needed to bring these holes in, I could just wallow them out. I can get in there with a milling bit and just keep grinding backwards and forwards until I oval those holes out, and that'll do the same thing. As long as I get the orientation right when it's on the manifold, so that obviously the openings line up, you know, you're good. But if I can blank these off and re-drill the holes, you know, neatly, then, you know, why not? Okay, so what we've done there, alright, orientation, is we've used the old SU Carb. It's quite a thick, don't know what kind of gasket it is, basically as a cutting guide. So we draw around it first of all, we line it up from the back so we can see that the holes line up properly, draw around it so we know it's in the right place, and then when we clamp it onto the drill deck, we use, obviously we clamp the gasket in place as well, so then when we're going down with the drill bit, it's just a case of making sure, sorry, changing hands, it's just a case of making sure that the drill goes down squarely through the gasket and then punches the corresponding hole down through the metal, which is pretty straightforward. They've gone in okay. You can see the old hole there with the aluminium filler in it, so you can see how much we've come in. You know, are they going to be perfectly lined up? I don't know. Until I actually get them back onto the manifold, obviously I'm not going to know, so I'm just going to have to sort of, you know, hope. But yeah, those are our new location holes put in. So the last job to do will be to countersink them. So I use the pillar drill again. Use a countersink bit. This is our 5/16 bolt that's going to be going through down into the manifold. That goes in there okay. So we just need to countersink that, drop it down, make sure they're completely flush, so that when we put our gasket on for our new carb there is no obstructions on it, and that should be it. So that's the job I wasn't looking forward to, and it's actually gone reasonably okay. So, but again, like I say, until we get it actually onto the manifold, we're not going to know. I may still have to get in there and file those holes a little bit, and maybe push or pull it around a little bit. I don't know. Ultimately, I suppose it is only an air path, isn't it? It's not like a I can't think of a good example, but you know what I mean. It's an air path, so even if the holes are, you know, a mil out or a fraction of a mil out, it's not like two holes where you're trying to put a bolt through, for example. You know, the holes need to be in exactly the same plane or the bolt won't go through. It isn't that, it's air. So if it's a mil out one side, it doesn't really matter. And I can always chamfer the neck of that spacer block if I need to. If it is slightly out when I line up into the manifold, I can take it off, go in the back and just chamfer it out a little bit. Obviously we want it to be as straight as possible, but you know, it's not going to not run if it's off centre by, you know, part of a mil or a mil. But as I say, of course I've bolted the manifold into the car now, haven't I? And I don't have anything here to check it against, so. Right, countersink. And then I think we're good, aren't we? Right, that's it, done. Those holes are now countersunk. Should be absolutely fine. But like with all these things, you never know until you actually fit it to the car and see what's what. So that's about as much as I can do down here. Let's get it home, line it up, and see if she bolts in nice and flush. We're back at home, and guess what? It fits! Get my choke cable out of the way. So, you know, pretty happy with that. They're all nicely flush and countersunk. Made ourselves a little cardboard gasket to go in behind it. Bit of grease on that, just to give myself a, you know, greasy gasket. So, that now means that I should be able to offer my carb up and fit it after I don't forget to actually reattach the exhaust as well, because that would be loud and annoying, wouldn't it? If we were to fire it back up and forget the exhaust and the water pipe, that would also be annoying. You know, it's like you get a bit excited, you get a bit carried away, you fire the damn thing up and the next thing you get a face full of coolant. So let's not do that. Right, let's offer the one thing I really want to do now, and then it'll be like my fears alleviated, will be to attach the carb, clear everything off, close the bonnet and make sure the bonnet fits. That's the bit now, you know, your worry when you're doing a job, your worries pass along. You tick one box, you go, and then but there's something else after it. And until you're driving the car down the road, then I suppose those worries are always there, because, you know, something can still go wrong. So let's offer the carb up, stick some bolts through, clear the deck, drop the bonnet, make sure it fits, and then I can sort of breathe a bit easier. And I still need to buy a new choke cable. I keep bloody forgetting I need to buy a new choke cable. This one, the end of it's gone like that. And trying to stuff it through a hole. You've been there, you know what it's like. Right. It fits. Oh yeah. Come on, have a look. Probably won't be able to see very well because it's going to be dark. I don't know, the camera actually shows it better than my eyes do. We have a good couple inches between the top of the bonnet and the top of the air filter. So that is a relief and a result. Swing the old girl open. And there we go. That's our single carb setup. So obviously we haven't got anything plumbed in yet, we have literally just put it on. I need to get some slightly longer bolts to hold the carb on because these ones are a bit on the short side. We haven't even threaded all the way through the nut, as you can see. So I underestimated my bolt length, but that's okay. That's a couple of bolts, doesn't matter where they are, that's just nuts and bolts. A couple of M8s and a couple of nylock washers were good. So it fits. So that's, you know, phew. Is all I can say. I may even reuse this hose from my brake booster to plumb in my water. And then I can probably use the shorter hose from that side of the water to go from the booster to the stud. But wouldn't that be nice if it all just fit together nicely? It would make a change, wouldn't it? And then this must be your breather. Well, she ain't going to fit on there. So I need to do something with that. Or maybe it will. It is silicone. Don't know. Might have to make a reducer for that. And then we need to look at the throttle cable. Throttle cable should be pretty straightforward. That should just come down through this little tower and attach in there. And I have drilled out that little bit on the side there to put my choke cable through. and that should go through okay. My choke cable, yeah, it's seen better days, right? You can see where I put some solder on it before to try and hold it all together, and I had to make my own little, whatever that's called, that the choke cable sits in down there. And of course, inside the car, when you pull the choke and twist it, as soon as you go over a bump, it slaps itself shut again. So clearly that choke cable is worn. I stole it from a friend's MG, alright? He's got an MG, an Ashley MG midget in his garden, which is awaiting restoration, and I scavenged a few parts of it. The choke cable was one of them. So I need to buy a new choke cable, but whew, that's good news, right? So it all fits. That was my primary concern, because if I close the bonnet and it hits the carb, you're in the you know what, aren't you? Because there isn't much you can do about that other than carve a hole in the bonnet and lay in and re-fiberglass it or something, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted everything to be reversible. The theme of this is reversibility. Back engineering in case you need to. So that's a huge weight off my mind. So I suppose I need to go down to the local hardware shop and get some bolts, because I don't think I've got any M8 bolts lying around with nylock washers and nuts. So, see if the hoses fit first, because then if they don't fit I can do them all in one go, and then we'll worry about the bolts, and then we can throw some fuel in it and just fire it up and see what happens. That's the bit that we're all looking forward to, right? Firing up for the first time. So we're close, or at least we're closer than we were. So let's get on with it. And my camera's steaming up again. I really should buy a new camera. Right, we have to have a quick run down to the hardware store because the hose was the wrong size. So this breather hose I was going to use for the heater hose is a little bit too small. So we've reused that back to the breather, and we've gone and got ourselves a new length of hose from the shop and a couple of slightly longer bolts to hold the carb on, because my other ones were a little bit too short. They are now M8 by 40mm long, although the one that goes in the bottom corner I had to cut about 5mm off it because it just wouldn't wiggle in. Man, this stuff ain't getting any cheaper, is it? 1 metre of 1/2 inch heater hose. Guess how much? No, £18. On eBay that would have been 10 quid tops. And this is kind of my problem. I understand the rising costs of stuff, but when retailers are putting that sort of markup on things and then they go bust and they then all start going, oh, we need a bailout, we're a national institution, we need more money, after you've been paying shareholders their dividends and the CEOs have been taking their bonus, and now all of a sudden you haven't got any money, and either the business closes and they expect something for it, or, you know, sorry, I'm really going on a bit of a rant, but it kind of annoys me. This is why online companies like eBay do so well, because if they can afford to sell it at those prices, then I understand retailers have got money to make on top. I worked in retail for 20 years. I ran my own shop for 8 of those years. I understand about overheads and costs. Believe me, no one understands more about margins than I do. But even so. Anyway, I shouldn't even be out here in this. I'm wearing my normal clothes. If my wife knew I was wearing my good jeans, these are my good jeans, to do work on the car, I'll be in all kinds of problems. So, rant and jeans aside, that is all buttoned up. So I've only got a couple of jobs left to do. So our exhaust manifold is now back together. I have doubled up on the exhaust gaskets. I had a spare brass gasket and I stuck two of them together in a vise with some goo and glued them together. Because this is an aftermarket stainless steel exhaust, that curvature was never quite right. It was always touching the corner of the bell housing. It was a tight fit. And whilst that was okay because it never actually vibrated because it was too tight, you know, it's not great. So by putting an extra spacer in on the manifold there, it's pushed that down just by a couple mil, and that seems to have done the trick. So yeah, hose is back on, breather hose for our brake boosters on, water hose is back on, so the heater matrix is all now connected up. We haven't got anything capped off. Breather for the carb has been fitted back to the rocker cover, although it is a slightly bigger diameter. Luckily it was a silicone hose. With a bit of grease, she went on just fine. We'll have to assume that's a breather hose, right? So the last thing to do now, it's 3 jobs. Fuel line, throttle cable, clutch cable. And once all those three pieces to the puzzle are back together, we should be good to go. But first of all, I've got to take off all this monstrosity, which is for my twin carb fuel line setup. So I need to get rid of all that and just have one nice line going into my carb here. And then work out something with the throttle linkages. So anyway, let's just get on with it, shall we? Oh. To give it a little bit of throttle. I haven't connected the throttle cable up yet. And to give the choke a bit of a yoink. It's not on the fast idle because the cable isn't long enough. Come on now, girl. I need to try and do both at the same time. Don't think my hands are long enough. Okay, there's life. Just need a bit of choke. Well, it's a start, isn't it? And can you guess what I forgot to do? Have a guess. Oil in the dashpot. We've all done it, right? Tell me you've done it as well. I was getting a bit carried away, put all the fuel lines in, I went, we can start it now, it's all done, let's go. Let's try that again. So that's it for the minute, guys. I think we're going to leave it there, otherwise this is just going to go on too long. Plus I need to order a new throttle cable, a new choke cable, then we need to try and get it set up, check for air leaks, do the mixture balancing, idle, fast idle, all of those things, and I can't really do those things whilst I'm still trying to reach into the cab to pull the choke and then quickly run around the front again to blip the, you know, it's just, it's very difficult when you're on your own. It's one of those two-man jobs. So it's going to take me a few days to get those ordered, so I may as well upload what I've got for the time being, and then unfortunately there'll be a part 3. I was hoping to get it wrapped up in 2 parts, but it's been a bit of a process, I'll be honest. It's not as simple as just buying a new manifold and a new carb and then just putting everything back together again. There's a more fabrication than I was expecting, and as I say, I wasn't expecting the throttle cable to not work, and plus all the plumbing I've had to do with the fuel lines and the water lines, etc. So it's a fair amount of work, but that is the bulk of it done now. You know, that is all the nasty work done, that's all the fettling, grinding, drilling and all that kind of stuff. Now it is just, like I say, doing the cables and that kind of thing. And rather than cut down my existing throttle cable and then try and use that, I'd rather just take it out completely for the, you know, for how hard it is to fit a throttle cable on a classic car, i.e. hook it into the back of the pedal, feed it through the firewall, and then poke it through the other side, which is, you know, that's what it is. Choke cable's a bit more of a pain in the ass because you've got to reach up behind the dashboard. You need a UJ in your arm, another wrist basically, to enable you to get behind the dash and get the nut off. It's a real pain in the ass, so I hate doing choke cables. But there we go, and I'm not built really for climbing in around classic cars, lying with your head upside down in the footwell with your feet over the top, reaching up like this, trying to undo nuts. You've been there, right? You know what it's like. But I'd rather do that, fit new ones, and put the old ones to a side with my old manifold, carbs and linkages, in case obviously I need to revert back to it for any reason. It all goes tits and it doesn't work. I'd rather have everything I had originally put to one side. I can just bolt it back on again. Or in future, should I wish to sell the car, then, you know, I've got the twin setup as it is with all the nuts and bolts. Or I could just sell the old manifold with the twin carbs and the choke linkages and everything else, and that would then literally be a bolt-on replacement for someone coming from a single carb setup or a HS2 setup. So, you know, there's that as well. So yeah, I don't like chopping things unless I absolutely have to. I'd rather just pay the 15, 10, 20 quid or whatever it is for a new cable, fit that, and then see how we go. And I'm guessing you can buy a generic classic car throttle cable. I don't know. I'm going to have a look online now. So there we go, I'll leave it there. I'll get part 3 in the next couple of weeks as soon as it's done, and we will get this thing idling, get it tuned, and then get it out on the road as soon as we get a respite from the weather we've had, which is this. It's just grey, it's wet, it's windy. I probably moan a lot on here about the weather in the UK, and a lot of people talk about the weather in the UK, and unfortunately, it's true. I've been keeping count. Since the end of September, we've had 4 days without rain. 4 days. And it's now mid-March. So it's really depressing. When spring comes, it's beautiful, and it's a great place to be, and it's a lovely time to be alive. But throughout the winter, my God, it's depressing. Especially when you've got a car like that, you just want to take it out and whiz it around on the roads a bit. Hence why I'm getting all this work done now while it's still winter. So when spring comes, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's all buttoned up, it runs lovely. I can take it out and whiz it around and do the fun stuff, actually driving it, rather than crushing myself down the side of my house on my hands and knees trying to do bolts up like this. But there we go. That's life, isn't it? So, I'll shut up, leave it there. Thank you all for watching, as always. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you all soon, and hopefully we'll get this thing out on the road and doing the thing it's meant to be doing. Until then, see you later on.